Hello, I'm Dr. Gillian Ray-Barruel, and in this session I'll be talking about searching the literature and downloading citations into EndNote. So you've decided to do a literature review. How are you going to find what you're looking for, and where do you start? Well, a literature review is always a systematic process. It begins with a research question. Defining your research question, then developing your search strategy, searching the literature, reviewing the evidence, critiquing the evidence, and writing the review. In this video, I will be covering the first three items in the process, and the next video will cover the final three items in the process. So let's get going in defining the research question. So this is done with a PICO format: participants, intervention, comparison, and outcomes. Now, my research question here, for example, is: do peripheral intravenous catheter maintenance, insertion and maintenance bundles reduce the prevalence of PIVC complications and bloodstream infection in hospital patients with a PIVC? And in this example, my participants are the hospital patients with a PIVC. The intervention would be the insertion and maintenance bundles. The comparison would be routine care. And the outcomes are prevalence of PIVC complications and bloodstream infection. Example 2. Do glow-in-the-dark toilet seats reduce the prevalence of falls in a hospitalised elderly population? Again, just step it through. My participants are the hospitalised elderly population. My intervention is glow-in-the-dark toilet seats. My comparison would be the regular toilet seats, what's already there. And my outcome would be the prevalence of falls. I've got my question. And once you have your PICO, it's time to develop the search strategy. So to begin with your search strategy, you come up with your inclusion and your exclusion criteria. What are you particularly interested in including, and what are you not interested in including? So if we take the glow-in-the-dark toilet seats in the elderly population example, my inclusion criteria, I would be interested in the hospitalised elderly population, but I need to define that a bit more carefully. Are these people over the age of 65 or 70, 75, 80? What is elderly? When I say they're hospitalised, does that mean just the medical surgical patients, or just medical patients, just surgical patients? Am I including intensive care? Am I including rehab wards? For example, so you've got to be drilling down into these criteria. Now, the other thing I need to think about is, am I only going to be looking for studies in my own native language, or am I fortunate that I speak a few languages, or I have a colleague who could help me look for literature in another language, and so I could broaden my search? Another important thing for inclusion is, am I interested in glow-in-the-dark toilet seats for all time, or am I only interested what's happened in the last 5 or 10 years? So you need to specify your time frame. What else? So I'm interested in falls. Well, what is my inclusion? Are these people at risk for falls? Are they people who've fallen in the past? Are they people who are using mobility aids? Or are they people who don't need mobility aids? So you see, what I'm trying to do here is drill down and make it a very specific inclusion and exclusion criteria. So exclusion criteria, I might exclude language is not in English. I might exclude patients who are using mobility aids. I might exclude people in rehab units, etc. So whatever the reason, it doesn't really matter for this example what the reason is, but you've got to be very clear about what you're interested in, but you've got to be just as clear in what you're not interested in. I hope that makes sense. So you've got to specify then your search terms and your keywords. Now, I'll be showing you how to find mesh headings, but several of the databases use mesh headings, which is medical subject headings. And these are really keywords that are, it's designed like a tree, and so they broaden your search for you. I can show you that. So I've got my search terms. They might be falls, elderly, medical patients, mobility aids, English, last 5 years. So this, I've narrowed my search. Now I'm going to choose my databases. Well, common databases for health topics are CINAHL, PubMed, Medline, Cochrane, Embase, PsycInfo and Web of Science. But I might not find anything, so I might have to go then to Google Scholar or dig around in government documents or hospital documents or other sources of information. My tip is always ask your friendly librarian for help with databases, because they're all different and the search strategies for each of the databases is often quite different. It's really important to get some help with that if it's the first time you're doing this. Another absolute important thing to do is keep records of the searches you've undertaken. You need to know how many articles you retrieve from each database. You need to know exactly which search terms you use. The Boolean operators are things like and, or not, and the little asterisk, which opens up the search to broader terms. Publication years, what language you're using, and if this is humans or animals, etc. Now, I do have a tip, and that's when you go onto a database, you create your own free account in the database and save your search. That way, if you need to go back and repeat the search or go back and look at what you did because you've logged out and you forgot to take a screenshot or download your search, it allows you to then go back in and find it again. So it's essential that you register with the database and save your searches. It'll save you a lot of time if you need to repeat the search at a later date. Now, I'm going to step through here the systematic review methodology using the PRISMA guidelines. The reason I'm showing you this is because you need to be able to keep track of what you find, and a PRISMA checklist is an excellent way to do that. So just going to step you through this. You'll see on this page, it's on the Equator Network, the PRISMA checklist and the PRISMA flow diagram. And these are really, really essential tools for doing a review. This is what a PRISMA flow diagram looks like. You will have seen these in research articles in journals. And they identify how many searches you found, how many records you found through your database searching, how many records you found through other searches, for example, looking at the reference lists of the articles that you found. And then how did you screen these articles? You screen removing duplicates, because there'll always be duplicates. You then exclude by the title, and then you exclude by the abstract. So say, for example, I'm looking at my elderly patient at risk for falls population. If I then go and download all my searches and I find that some of these are community papers, then they're not going to be relevant to my topic, so I will exclude them. Or I might read the article and find that it was only in French, and I decide that, well, my French is not good enough that I'm going to be able to read this article and include it, so I have to exclude it. Then you narrow it down. After you've excluded for titles and abstracts, you then have a much smaller number that you can actually read the full text articles. But again, you might read the full text articles and decide that actually this is not an intervention for preventing falls in the toilet. This is, an intervention for preventing falls in the bedroom, at the bedside. So it's not going to be relevant to your work. So again, you'd exclude it. And finally, you'd end up with a total number of studies included in your review. So this review in this diagram is for the PIVC bundles. It's not for the toilet seats. I couldn't actually find anything on those. So there's an opening for somebody who wants to go and do some research. But you can see here that in my bundles systematic review, I came from 14,414 when I first searched the literature, and then 42 through other sources, down to 13 articles made it to the final review. So that is a lot of work. It took at least 2 people screening articles, but that just shows you how to step through the process of screening. Now, CKN is available to all Queensland Health employees, and this is where you'll find your databases. So let's start with CINAHL. I'm just going to step you through a basic search in CINAHL. Here you can see that CINAHL has, on the top tab, it has CINAHL subject headings. So this is really useful. This is what, instead of mesh terms, CINAHL uses subject headings. But again, it's words that will prompt your search. So I encourage you to go and look in there and see what sort of subject headings might be relevant to your patient population. So, for instance, my falls in the toilet. Now, you can also check this box here, which says suggest subject terms. So I might put in falls, and then it might suggest falling, or fallen, or fall, things like that. Or slip, trip, for instance. So it's a great idea to tick that box, because it will broaden your search. So the search strategy there, you can add fields to that. You can change. Do you want the select the field? You could choose an author's name. You could choose a word in a title of a paper, or a word in the abstract of a paper, or just full text. You can make that as broad and narrow as you like. It's always good to start broad and then narrow down, because you don't want to miss things. And here is the area where I said you should go on and sign in, make yourself an account and sign in, so that everything you do while you're on this page, the search gets saved. It will save you a lot of grief later on. So I'll show you down here. I've done a little search, and I had my first, you can see down the bottom it says S1. That's falls, prevention and mortality I searched for. And I then did another search, falls, hospital and elderly. Now, there you can see for falls, prevention and mortality, I had 826 results. For falls, hospital and elderly, I had 736 results. And what I then do is I combine those searches, S1 and S2. I want both. And you can see that only gave me 37 results. Well, that's too narrow. I'm sure I've missed things. So I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do a different search. S4, you can see there, is S1, search 1, or search 2. So I'm really broadening the pool by putting in or, and narrows it because I'm being very specific. I want falls, prevention, mortality, and hospital and elderly. Then I only had 37 articles. But if I'm happy to accept falls and hospital and elderly or prevention and mortality, then I've got 1,525 articles I could look at. So or is what you want to go broad, and is what you want to go narrow. So here's my search. This is S1 or S2. I've opened up my 1,525 articles, and then I can start looking through them. Or I could refine my results. I think, well, if I see the publication date, that's from 1978 to 2019. I'm actually not particularly interested in what was happening 50 years ago in falls. So I'm going to narrow that. And then when you see the source types, I'm actually not particularly interested in magazines and dissertations. I really want to see academic journals. So I'm going to tick that box too. And after I do that, I keep building my search, and I've applied dates of in the last 5 years. I now only want English. I've defined my population as age 65 and older. Still search 1 or search 2, but you can see here I'm now on search 7, and once I've narrowed it to the population that I actually want, I've only got 189 articles that I'm going to be looking at. So I've gone from 1,525 articles, which may or may not have been relevant, to 189 articles, which are far more likely to be relevant. So what I want to do next is I want to export my 189 articles. I want to export them into an EndNote library, because it is much easier to go through the EndNote library and review the titles and abstracts through EndNote rather than sitting here in Cinal and going through 189 articles one by one. So I'm going to export. There's my 189 articles. And what I want to do is share them. So I go to this share button, and that opens up this link, and it shows me here where am I going to share to. So I'm going to email myself a link to download these 189 results. Okay. Now when you email yourself a link, do make sure it's in RIS format, because that's EndNote compatible. There's no point in emailing yourself a link to all text. You really want it in RIS format. I'll show you Medline just very briefly. It's set out very similar to Cinal because it is the same. 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 It is the same publisher. But you can see there that Medline uses mesh headings instead of CINAHL subject headings. Other than that, it works very similar to CINAHL. And again, you can sign in, make yourself an account. You can save different folders for different searches. So, for example, you might be doing different assignments and you want to save your searches separately. That's not a problem. You can do that in any of the databases, and then you can go back to the relevant search when it's time to redo your search or update your search, etc. PubMed is freely available. You can get to it through CKN, but you can also get to it without CKN. It is public medicine. So again, you sign in, make yourself an account, is the first thing you should do. Then you can start searching. Now here, there's a button called Advanced. So if you click that open, that will open up more search fields, because at the moment there's only one search field there. So by clicking Advanced, you'll give yourself more options for searching. And that's what happens when you click on Advanced. It shows you the Advanced Search Builder, very similar to the one that we just saw in CKN. So you've got your fields. You can change that to author, title, abstract, keywords, mesh terms, whatever you like. If we go to more resources, opening that up shows you where to find the mesh terms. So there's a mesh database. I'm going to click on that. So this brings me to mesh, medical subject headings. And I'll show you how to use this. Again, it's got an advanced button, so we're going to click that. And I'm putting in falls, accidental falls. That was when I put in falls, it said accidental versus being pushed, I suppose, but that wasn't an option. And then I'm going to search. When I open up accidental falls, you can see that it opens up down the bottom there like a little tree. But an interesting thing is it also shows you different terms for falls. So falls, falling, accidental, slip and fall. Well, I wouldn't have really thought of slip before I saw this. So it just prompts you with other things that you could be thinking of. Another thing it does, it asks you, well, what about falls? Because, you know, there are many records for falls, but what are you particularly interested in? Well, I'm particularly interested in the mortality, preventing falls, but I'm also interested in organisations because I'm looking at hospitals. What are hospitals doing for falls? But what I'm not particularly interested in there, and I haven't circled it, is I'm not interested in economics or the history of falls, epidemiology of falls, trends of falls, etc. So I'm being very specific about what I am interested in here. And once I tick on mortality, organisation, prevention and control, I'm going to run that search. You can see on the right hand side there, I've got a search builder. So it's building my tree of searching. And I'm going to run my search. And I have 8,948. So what am I going to do? I'm going to narrow my search. It's too big. I'm not looking at all these articles. Okay, so I'm going to narrow my search. Again, I'm going to choose my publication dates. I only want humans. I only want English. I want people over the age of 65, etc. Another interesting thing on PubMed is on the right-hand side there, it shows you similar sort of articles. So that's a really good way to have a look around and show what you might not have thought of. You might actually end up adding search terms to your search because it just directs you in different ways. Very useful. But I'm going to limit my search because 8,948 is too many. And once I limit my search, I only want clinical trials because I'm looking at my toilet seats versus normal seats, my glow-in-the-dark toilet seats versus normal seats. I only want to know in the last 5 years. I only want to know humans. I only want to know English, aged over 65. So what are my falls studies here? And I'm down to 345, which is far more manageable. So now I've got a manageable amount of trials since I've done my limits. You can also click on similar articles and see if there's something that's particularly relevant. You could click on that. And then I'm going to save my search. I'm going to download my citations, send them to myself, and put them in my EndNote. So from PubMed, I click on Send. I then click on Citation Manager. It will ask me how many I'm going to send. And PubMed will only send a maximum of 200 citations at a time, so you need to repeat the process. So I can change it to 200. I can start from citation 1, create a file. It'll create a PubMed file. Then I repeat the process. So I do the rest of my search starting from citation 201. And that way I'll get all my citations. Now, I've now got several files which are my downloaded citation files, and what I want to do is put them into EndNote. Now, basic EndNote skills will save you hours. You would not believe how much time you will save with EndNote. You need to learn how to use it if you're doing any sort of research, any sort of study, writing up papers. Now, all databases and most journals have an export citation function, and clicking on the citation download while EndNote is open imports all your citations directly into the EndNote library. You can also import references via EndNote itself. You can also add them manually, but if you don't have to add them manually, it's a bonus. It's going to save you hours. If you don't know how to do EndNote, go and see a librarian, go and sign up for a course because it's invaluable. Just say, for example, you're on a journal page and you want to keep this article. Well, most journal pages will have an option, export citation. You just click on that, it gives you a citation file, and if you click on the citation file while you're in EndNote, it'll import it directly in. I've clicked on citation. It shows me this is what you're going to get. Yes, I'm happy with that. So I export it. Here's another one, another journal. Looks very different. This citation export is under Tools. So sometimes on a journal page, they're not all the same, and you might have to go digging a bit to find out how can I export the citation. So it could be called Citation, it could be called Tools, it could be called File Manager. There's various things. But on this one it's called Tools. Again, I click it open and it says, do you want to export the citation? Yes, I do. It says, how do you want it? And I want it in EndNote. And I download. So here's my EndNote. Now, EndNote is available to all staff. So you can just download the file on your home computer or on your hospital computer, not a problem. You can create folders in your EndNote library to organise your database searches, and you can see down there on the left-hand side, I've done that. So that tells me how many I found in each database. You can use your EndNote to store your articles with the respective citations. You can see that little paperclip. That means there's an article behind that. So all my articles are automatically there. I don't need to keep a separate file of my articles. I can just keep them all in EndNote with the citation. Now, I love this function. There's a rating function that you can rank your articles in order of relevance to your own work. That's here. So this is my little system. If I find the article is extremely useful, I give it 5 stars. If I read it and I think, actually, it's not useful at all, I give it 1 star. But I always give it stars because that way I know if I need to go back to it. And then I can sort by rating. So I can just see the most useful articles. The other thing you can do, you can then use the search function to search your library. That's up there. So, I remember there was a paper, I think it was by Jones. I think it was probably, 2010, for instance, or there was an article there on PIV bundles. Which one was it? You can just search. It's easy. The other lovely thing about EndNote, you can actually find full text articles and import them directly into EndNote without having to go look for the article. EndNote will do that for you. You can view and annotate your full text articles. You can open them up, you can draw on them, you can write notes on them, you can add URLs or images or whatever you like to EndNote. It's like a big filing cabinet and it's absolutely so fabulous. So if you don't know EndNote, go to a workshop. You can watch this tutorial here, there's a link, or have a chat to me or your friendly researcher or librarian, and they will definitely be keen to help you with this. That's all. Thank you for listening.